Millions vanished overnight, entire fortunes disappeared in hours, and it all happened in 1719, when one man, John Law, gambled with the fate of France using nothing but paper money. France was drowning in debt after decades of war. Investors, nobles, and common citizens poured wealth into Law's schemes, believing that paper money could create instant fortunes. For a brief moment, the dream seemed real. Paris buzzed with excitement, newspapers shouted about riches made overnight, and everyone wanted a piece of the action. But this was no ordinary gamble. It was a national experiment in human greed, trust, and financial emotion, one misstep away from catastrophe. And catastrophe did come. John Law was a Scottish banker, gambler, and visionary. France, at the start of the 18th century, was in crisis. Wars had drained the treasury, taxes were oppressive, and gold reserves were dangerously low. The monarchy was desperate, yet cautious, seeking bold solutions without risking outright rebellion. Law believed that money itself was a tool, not wealth. Gold alone could not solve France's problems. By issuing paper money backed by trade and future profits, he could stimulate the economy, pay off debt, and create liquidity where none existed. In 1717, Law founded the Mississippi Company, granted a monopoly over France's North American territories, primarily Louisiana. He promised that profits from trade, land, and resources would repay the national debt while enriching investors. The public was intrigued. Shareholders included wealthy nobles, merchants, and ordinary citizens. Paper notes could be exchanged for shares, and profits would allegedly multiply with every new transaction. At its peak, the Mississippi Company was trading tens of millions of livres, roughly $100 to $200 million today, far beyond its actual physical wealth. Confidence was everything. One rumor, one misstep, could cause the illusion to shatter. Law also founded a bank, issuing paper notes as currency, allowing citizens to spend, invest, and gamble on future profits. For a while, France seemed on the verge of economic renaissance. Trade flowed, paper money circulated, and optimism was everywhere. Yet danger lurked. The colonies were underdeveloped. Actual trade could not support the massive paper valuations. Any loss of confidence would be catastrophic. And Law's empire rested entirely on faith, trust, and public excitement. The mania grew rapidly. Share prices for the Mississippi Company soared far beyond real value. Ordinary citizens sold homes, pawned jewelry, and borrowed money to buy shares. Investment became a frenzy, not rational speculation, but emotional greed. Law stoked the fire. He issued more paper money and expanded credit, allowing investors to trade endlessly. Newspapers heralded fortunes made overnight, and Parisians crowded the streets to buy shares, believing that instant wealth was guaranteed. Speculation reached a fever pitch. Wealthy nobles bragged about gains, merchants borrowed against expected profits, and ordinary citizens risked everything for a slice of the action. It was a classic case of confidence fueling itself. The higher the price, the more people wanted in. But bubbles are fragile. By early 1720, doubts crept in. Reports suggested the Mississippi Company's assets were overvalued and that profits from trade were exaggerated. Fear replaced excitement. Investors rushed to convert their paper notes into gold, seeking something tangible. The bank could not meet demand. Lines stretched for blocks. Panic swept through Paris. Millions of livres, fortunes that seemed secure just hours earlier, vanished overnight. Nobles lost estates, merchants went bankrupt, and ordinary citizens faced ruin. Emotionally, the collapse was devastating. Families argued over lost inheritances. The once thriving financial optimism turned into despair and humiliation. John Law, once celebrated as a genius, now faced the consequences of a nation's rage and shattered economy. Law attempted to stabilize the situation. He promised further profits, issued more paper notes, and urged investors to remain calm. For a moment, a few speculators held on, but confidence was gone. The paper money system, dependent entirely on trust, failed instantly. Withdrawals overwhelmed the bank. Gold reserves ran dry. Shares plunged. people rushed through the streets, trying to reclaim their wealth, only to find empty vaults and worthless notes. The human cost was immense. Panic turned to anger. Crowds gathered outside the bank and law's offices, demanding explanations. Nobles threatened violence. Merchants collapsed under debt. Ordinary citizens who had invested their life savings were left destitute. Politically, the monarchy intervened. Louis XV's regents feared social unrest and the collapse of order. John Law was forced to flee Paris, leaving behind the wreckage of his ambitious experiment. The Mississippi Company survived in name, but had lost all credibility. This collapse highlighted a universal truth about finance. Money is as much emotion as numbers. Greed, fear, hope, and panic drive economies just as much as gold or trade. France learned it the hard way. The Mississippi bubble's fallout was felt across all levels of French society. Merchants lost businesses, artisans their livelihoods, and households their savings. Nobles who had leveraged their estates found themselves bankrupt. The streets of Paris were filled with despair, frustration, and public outrage. Socially, the collapse was humiliating. Families fought over ruined inheritances. Communities lost faith in institutions. The public realized that paper promises could not replace tangible wealth. The collective trauma shaped attitudes toward finance for decades. Economically, the damage lasted years. Investment slowed, trade faltered, and the French economy struggled to regain stability. Confidence in credit systems, banks, and paper money was shaken. Yet the collapse also left a legacy of lessons learned. Investors understood the risks of speculation. Governments recognized the importance of regulation, oversight, and transparency. Law's experiment, though catastrophic, laid the foundation for modern banking, financial instruments, and economic theory. Emotionally, this story resonates even today. People relate to the shock of losing everything overnight, the panic and the human greed and ambition that fueled such a dramatic rise and catastrophic fall. The Mississippi bubble is more than history. It's a blueprint of human behavior in finance. John Law showed how confidence, trust, and emotion can inflate economies, create fortunes, and destroy them overnight. Future financial crises, the South Sea bubble, tulip mania, and even modern market crashes echo the same pattern. Speculation driven by greed, overconfidence, and emotion. Law's experiment also foreshadowed central banking, paper money systems, and the idea of credit as currency. France eventually recovered, but the memory of the bubble shaped generations. Governments implemented cautious monetary policies. Investors became wary. And historians remembered Law as a man whose vision was brilliant but flawed in execution. The story also reminds us of a fundamental truth. Money is not just numbers. It is hope, ambition, greed, and trust. One day fortunes feel endless. The next, they vanish, leaving devastation behind. Millions lost wealth overnight, yet the lessons endured. From chaos, systems evolved. From human error, structures were built to prevent future catastrophe. The Mississippi bubble is thus both a tragedy and a lesson, a human story, a financial story, and a cautionary tale rolled into one. John Law's Mississippi Company wasn't just a financial experiment, it was a human drama played out in gold, paper, and ambition. Millions were created and destroyed in hours. A nation teetered on the edge. It was the first true lesson in speculative bubbles, proving that trust, greed, and human emotion are the most powerful forces in finance. From that chaos emerged the blueprint for modern banking, investment, and economic risk, a legacy as dramatic as it was costly.